and the purpose is to enable you become a full human being, to live in dignity. So when we talk about child rights, we are talking about legal entitlements that are given to children. And so the rights have sources. So in the Gambia, we're talking about the Children's Act 2005, the 1997 Constitution of the Gambia, the Women's Act 2010, the Trafficking in Persons Act 2007, the Tourism Offences Act 2003. But at the international level or regional level, we're talking about, say, the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, or at the UN level, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the 3 optional protocols. But in a layman's language, child rights would be defined as the fundamental needs of children that society has an obligation to fulfill. So we are talking about needs of children, but needs that also place obligation on what we would call duty bearers, like parents, like the state, to fulfill. So rights are basically needs of children. One in Mandinka, one would call sulo or sohla halebi, but which probably transcends beyond that sulo drong, because then it imposes an obligation. So it becomes what Mandinkas would call nyanto, dindungla nyanto, or the Wolofs would call cheri halel. Ahi halel. Because once you say aha, it places an obligation on somebody, on what a duty bearer, to ensure that that sohla, that need of the child is fulfilled. So you have an obligation. So in a nutshell, child right is the fundamental needs of children. So the word fundamental needs, or the words fundamental needs, are important. So people don't see this as an imposition. I always tell people that when we talk about child rights, we need to understand that if it's about religion, the Bible or the Quran actually have given rights to children. So it predates, so to speak, or they predate the Convention on the Rights of the Child, or the African Charter, or the Constitution of the Gambia, 1997 Constitution, or the Children's Act. So these are things that God said. God said every parent, every caregiver must give your offspring, must give somebody who is under your care.
Okay, now I guess that's clear. But then one thing that is probably not clear in not only in the Gambia but across the world, and of course in Africa specifically, is why do we need to have these issues about rights of children? Because we know, like for instance, of course, the Constitution talks about rights of every individual. We have other international instruments that have been there even before the coming of the CRC, giving rights to every human being. But here we have a convention and a charter that looks at the rights of children specifically. What is the importance of that?
Okay, that's important. Of course, of course, children are part of that group called human beings. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for instance, or the Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, or on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, or the Constitution, or the Human Rights, Charter of Africa. But when we look at children as a specific group, and that's why, because when people are grouped together, more often than not, the most powerful, the more powerful, the one who has voice, who can do something for himself or herself, is the one who probably will predominate the other. So if you group children and adults together, it's very likely that adults would come first. So you look at a child and how dependable that person is. You look at a child, how vulnerable that person is, how defenseless that person is, how voiceless that person is. So just the status of being a child disadvantages that person who is under 18 years. So the world decided that it's important that that category, specific and important as they are, should have a convention or a charter that specifically addresses their needs, because the needs of children are diametrically opposite to the needs of adults. And we know that if there is an upheaval, you look at CAR, for instance. I mean, the main victims are children. The ones who are feeling the brunt of the upheaval there are children. So the world decided that because that this category is very dependable, is dependent, is very vulnerable, is very disadvantaged. It suffers the most. The world decided in 1990 or 1989 to adopt a convention on the rights of the child. But we need to retrace that a little bit, because the first declaration on the rights of the child was in 1924. Again, immediately after the First World War. And then in 1978, the whole discourse about rights of children came up. If we just oppose that against the backdrop of the Second World War, then we will realize also that the group that suffered most were children. And you also look at how UNICEF came into being. It used to be referred to as the milkman of Europe, because it came out as a UN agency purposely to ensure that children in emergencies are taken care of. So children are a very special group. In the country, we always say children are the future, because we know that they carry posterity, they carry history. But children are just not the future, they are also your present. They are our present, because it's that present that grows to become the future. So if we want to have a future for the Gambia, then we need to concentrate on our children. We need to ensure that the rights of our children are fulfilled. Then we would have a better future.
Okay, thank you, Njindu. Again, on the issues of rights, we know in the Gambia we have quite a number of people who have some weird ideas, or we call it misconception about rights of children. And that includes the aspect of discipline, the issues of dress code, and issues of sexual abuse, linking it to the issues of rights. Maybe we'll look at one after the other, but to start with, how does rights correspond with discipline? Ensuring that a child behaves in a way which is acceptable at the family level, but also at the community and at school level.
I think, yes, misconceptions abound about rights of children. And maybe it's because majority of the people haven't read the Convention on the Rights of the Child, or the African Charter, or the Children's Act, or even the Constitution of the Gambia, to know what rights entail therein. And I think so. Quite a lot of people just hear child rights and then just attack it without knowing. But I think once we understand what rights are, as I said, rights are there to make you a human being, to ensure you live in dignity, you have dignity, you are able to achieve your maximum potentials in life. And so if we look at rights of children, we know that the state, because it's the state that ratifies these international conventions or regional conventions, the state is the primary duty bearer. So because let's take, for instance, right to education. Right to education entails that schools are there, that teachers are employed, that the school environment is friendly, that teachers have good remuneration, that there are books and all the other materials that make learning useful are present. No one parent can do that for himself or herself, cannot build a school. So the obligation is on the state as a primary duty bearer to ensure that the smallest citizens it have are able to enjoy that. But I think if we also read the Convention on the African Charter, we realize that the family is a very important component. You read the preamble of the African Charter, or the preamble of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, it places the family at the center. That states have an obligation to support the family, to support parents, so that parents are able to fulfill their child-rearing obligations. So everything revolves around the family. And so discipline becomes an important component of child rights, that every child ought to be disciplined. Every child ought to know what your rights are, but also what the rights of others are. In Article 31 of the Convention of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child is specific on responsibilities of children. So because it realizes that children are just not individuals, but they're also part of the group. And because they are part of the family, part of the community, part of the country, and part of the world, they have an obligation towards